Good morning. It is Thursday, the 3rd of April, and you're live here on Euronews. You're watching Europe Today, our show all about the first ever EU Central Asia Summit taking place today and tomorrow. I'm Maeve McMahon, broadcasting from Brussels. And this morning, as I said, we're zooming in on Central Asia, on the stands, as it's in Samarkand in East Central Uzbekistan, where this first ever EU Central Asia Summit is taking place. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the EU Council President Antonio Costa have already arrived. Their aim, build new alliances and business links with these relatively unknown countries nestled between Russia and China. With the world economy shook by the uncertainty of Trump's trade war and the EU eager to tap into the region's critical raw materials and energy, EU leaders are calling this a landmark moment. And to hear more about why this summit is taking place and what it means for us, Euronews correspondents Sandor Zhiros and Alice Tidy are on the ground in Samarkand. We'll be joining them live very shortly for an update. We also have an exclusive interview with the EU Council President, Antonio Costa. He spoke to Euronews in Strasbourg ahead of his trip.
Dans ces nouveaux cadres où le commerce international est sur menace, il faut renforcer nos efforts pour trouver de nouveaux marchés.
We'll bring this interview a little bit later to you, but for now, let's go straight to Samarkand, to where the action is and where, in fact, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke already in the early hours of the morning. Our correspondents Sandor Zhiros and Alice Tidy are standing by for us. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. First question, what are the expectations for this first ever EU Central Asia Summit? What should we be looking out for?
Good morning, Maeve, from Samarkand, from this historical city. As you said, the expectations are very high as the security. Myself, I have never seen such a high security at a summit. We have policemen at every 50 meters. As for the expectations, the two blocs, Central Asia and the European Union, have decided that they will step up the cooperation. They will open a new chapter and they will agree on strategic cooperation between each other. What does it mean with the bigger picture? Well, Central Asia is located between Russia and China and is on the political orbit of these two regional powers and is willing to open up towards Europe. And Europe has a big issue with its traditional ally, the United States. We are just entering a trade war, so Europe is also willing to open up for new partnership in the framework of multilateralism. So this is the big picture. Both sides think it's a win-win situation. This is what Uzbekistan president told us a couple of days ago, that it's a win-win situation. They are ready to explain to us.
So some of the big gets with the EU at the summit relate to energy and for raw materials.
And that was
hope that they will sign a declaration, commitments in the local industry, but also in infrastructure, including in the Trans-Caspian transport corridor, which would drastically reduce the time to export. The President told Euronews earlier this week that he wants to develop a so-called green strategic corridor to boost energy security between the EU and Central Asia that would bypass Russia. And then one of the aims that the two sides really want to emphasize is also regional cooperation and regulatory harmonization, because the better these five countries work together, the easier it is for European companies to come and work here. A couple of contentious issues will be on the agenda. One of them relates to human rights, because some NGOs have called for the EU to call out Central Asian countries over backsliding of freedom of expression. And then the second contentious issue is on sanctions circumventions relating to Russia's full-scale war on Ukraine, that these two sides will have to work out.
OK, Alice Tidy and Sandor Zhiros reporting for us there live from Samarkand. Excuse us to our viewers for the technical issues we had there. But of course, Alice and Sandor and the whole Euronews team will be covering the summit all day for us today and tomorrow. So keep an eye on Euronews and Euronews.com. Well, As we heard there, the EU does want to take this partnership to another level in these times of geopolitical and economic uncertainty. For more on how the European Union will work on this relationship, especially given the cultural differences at stake, Euronews reporter Roman Armengau sat down with the EU Council President, Antonio Costa, in Strasbourg. She began by asking him what exactly his goal was with this first ever EU Central Asia summit.
Notre but, c'est d'élever notre niveau de partenariat au niveau de partenariat stratégique. Et on travaille sur ce qu'on a fait déjà depuis 2019, où on a approuvé une stratégie sur l'Asie centrale. On a approuvé en 2023 une feuille de route qui est en train d'être développée. Et maintenant, on a ces sommets où, avec la présidente de la Commission européenne, avec moi-même, pour renforcer notre coopération avec les 5 pays de l'Asie centrale.
Et le renforcement de cette coopération, est-ce que c'est un message également qui est passé à la Russie ?
Non, c'est surtout un message pour toutes les régions. Le monde, c'est multipolaire et on doit développer notre relation dans le cadre multilatéral, mais aussi entre régions. Il y a des intérêts communs. On a une histoire profonde avec les pays de l'Asie centrale. Dans l'histoire, ils ont été le pont de liaison entre l'Europe et l'Asie. Et c'est pour ça que la question de la connectivité, et notamment le développement du couloir transcaspien, c'est quelque chose de central. Il y a aussi d'opportunités de coopération très fortes dans des domaines cruciaux, comme l'énergie, la question de l'eau, c'est une question essentielle dans les pays de l'Asie centrale, et aussi un accord de coopération sur les sujets des matières premières critiques.
Vous parliez de l'histoire de l'Asie centrale et de l'histoire de l'Union européenne. Ces deux histoires ont fait naître des valeurs et des cultures politiques différentes. Pensez-vous que celles-ci sont conciliables, alignées, et pensez-vous que nous avons la même vision du monde ?
Bon, vous savez, évidemment, chaque région a sa propre vision du monde en fonction de son histoire, de sa culture et de sa présence géographique dans le monde. Donc cette diversité des points de vue entre l'Europe et les pays de l'Asie centrale, c'est compréhensible. Mais ce nouveau niveau de coopération en tant que partenariat stratégique nous offre un nouveau cadre de dialogue politique, notamment sur les relations extérieures, sur les domaines des questions politiques, soit au niveau multilatéral, soit des questions de sécurité. Par exemple, le trafic de drogue, c'est une question vraiment importante pour les uns et pour les autres. La prévention du terrorisme, c'est vraiment important pour les uns et pour les autres.
Vous parlez des différents secteurs de coopération, l'une d'entre elles est l'énergie. Quelle est la stratégie énergétique de l'Union européenne en Asie centrale et dans le Caucase, et quels sont ses objectifs de développement dans cette région clé ?
L'Asie centrale peut être un fournisseur important d'énergie pour l'Union européenne, mais on veut coopérer aussi dans le développement des énergies décarbonisées. Et ça, c'est un enjeu central dans ces pays. Et aussi dans le domaine de l'eau. La question de l'eau, c'est une question vraiment importante, critique pour la vie dans ces pays. Et donc, c'est assez possible de coopérer ensemble. Mais je dirais que peut-être le projet le plus ambitieux, plus structurant de notre relation avec l'Asie centrale, mais avec aussi les pays de l'Asie, c'est le développement de ces couloirs transcaspiens qui a un objectif très clair, c'est de réduire à 15 jours le commerce entre l'Asie et l'Europe.
Et il y a déjà des entreprises européennes qui sont implantées dans le territoire, oui. Mais ce ne sont pas les seules. Comment est-ce que l'Union européenne peut concurrencer les géants américains et chinois dans la région ?
La intensification de nos relations avec les 5 pays de l'Asie centrale renforce aussi la position de nos entreprises ainsi que comme les entreprises de ces pays dans l'Europe. Donc il faut renforcer ces liaisons. On est en train de négocier un accord de préférence générale du point de vue tarifaire. Et dans ce nouveau cadre où le commerce international est sur menace, il faut renforcer nos efforts pour trouver de nouveaux marchés et d'offrir de nouvelles opportunités dans le marché européen pour ceux qui veulent investir en Europe.
And that was the stance of the EU Council President Antonio Costa on this summit. And meanwhile, the President of Uzbekistan told Euronews that this summit is truly historic. It's the first time these 5 countries come together in the one place with the European Union. But what about MEPs in Strasbourg? Seems like they're also pretty pleased the EU Central Asia Summit is taking place, but they have some points they'd like to see raised. Euronews' Noah Schumann has more.
Yes, Maeve, I'm standing here in the European Parliament of Strasbourg, where I'm asking MEPs what they're expecting of this very first edition of the EU Central Asia Summit that is taking place this week in Uzbekistan. You will see that the answers are quite in favor of strengthening those relationships between those two regions. Take a listen.
Well, I hope it will be another opportunity for Europe to do what it has been doing in the past few months, which is to find alternative markets and open alternative markets in light of the new protectionist stance of the United States, and show the world that Europe is a reliable partner open for trade.
They are, let's say, in a geographically area where a huge Russian influence is given, and therefore it is important also that the European Union is speaking to them.
This week is the EU Central Asia Summit that is taking place in Uzbekistan. What are your expectations about this summit?
I think the European Union needs to go there with an approach that says we're respecting everyone. You know, we shouldn't impose just our will. We need to listen to the different parties there. Central Asia is a very strategic region, and we need good relations.
I hope that we'll be able to take some step ahead in the field of energy.
I hope that we have the human rights in the focus and that the EU defend their values. That is important. And in Uzbekistan as well, if they want to cooperate with us.
And that was Noah Schumann there reporting from Strasbourg on the views of members of the European Parliament. But what about Uzbeks themselves? How do they feel about this first ever summit taking place? Well, Euronews' Bojan Bricic reports now from Samarkand.
The people of Samarkand, the city globally known as the Pearl of Asian culture, history and architecture, are used to having a lot of foreigners and events in their city. But ahead of the Central Asia EU Summit, first of its kind ever, they are aware that it will put the name of their city on world's maps once again, and not only touristic ones.
I think the most important thing, this is first summit, European Union and Central Asia.
Markaziy Osiyo mamlakatlari Yevropa mamlakatlari bilan integratsiya qilsa, ular bilan hamkorlik qilsa, bu faqat mamlakatlar xalqlarining rivojiga xizmat qiladi deb o'ylayman.
Мы очень довольны тем, что наше государство выходит на новый уровень и взаимодействует с внешними государствами.
Это все равно польза будет от этого. И стране, и народу.
Нам нехорошо. Они говорят, что Россия такой. Они хуже России же, это европейцы.
And that was Bojan Bricic reporting for us there from Samarkand. Well, that brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. We were just focusing in on the first ever EU Central Asia Summit taking place. We'll be back again tomorrow in Samarkand, where our correspondents Chandra Girosh and Alice Tidy and the whole Euronews team will be standing by for us once again. For more analysis, of course, you can take a look at their reads on Euronews.com or download our app. We'll see you soon on Euronews.
Euronews. The news.
U.S. President Donald Trump has declared a 10% baseline tax on imports from all countries and even higher tariff rates